Welcome to, believe it or not, 10 terrific tools for storytelling for better speaking. I know I promised, I think 6 or 7, but we're looking at 10 today. So let me just go right into it and ask you a question, and you can feel free to unmute yourself. Just make sure you mute yourself afterwards. Actually, you don't even need to unmute yourself. I just need to watch you. Raise your hand if you'd like to add humor to your speeches. Never add humor to your speeches. Never add humor to your speech. Uncover humor within it. Never add humor, uncover it. Yeah, what's the difference? Yes. The difference is when you add humor, a lot of times it feels forced. And you got to go on a detour to get it, and it might take you off message. But when you uncover humor, it's organic. It's right there. It's within your message. But here's the great part about it, Marion. When you uncover humor, and let's say you go out and give that part of your presentation, and they don't laugh, it's not embarrassing because it's still true and it's still part of your story and it's still part of the where you're going with your message. So we want to uncover humor. So we're going to find lots of ways to uncover humor today and to uncover the heart of your message as well. So we're looking at humor and heart, and we're looking at 7 specific tools that we can use. So where are you going to find the humor? First place you're going to find it is in your stories. This is my storytelling model. More specifically, you're going to find humor within your characters. And even more specifically, you're going to find humor between the dialogue that your characters speak to each other. So we're really going to focus on dialogue today. In fact, let's take a look at one of my quick stories. This was me in Dublin, Ireland, and you'll see a little bit of dialogue and uncovering of humor. Take a look. In fact, raise your hand if you watched any of the Summer Olympics. Oh, I love the Summer Olympics. But I like the 2012 Summer Olympics even better. Because, do you know who the oldest participant in the 2012 Summer Olympics was? Equestrian. Yes. It was a 74-year-old equestrian from Japan. 74-year-old equestrian from Japan. So my 7-year-old son and I are watching this on TV. And of course, all the commentators kept harping on was the guy's age. Right? They just kept saying, he's 74. Can you believe he's 74? By golly, he's 74. Finally, my 7-year-old son looked up and said, well, how old is the horse? Character to character dialogue, right? How old is the horse? That gets the laugh. It's part of my story. I turn it into part of my message. But here's the problem. A lot of speakers only use one type of dialogue. And that's character to character, what one character says to another character. Well, guess what? If you'd like to get 7 times the amount of humor in your presentation, guess what we need? 7 different types of dialogue. That's right, 7. Even Marion and Isaac are looking at me like, Craig, you added a type? Yeah, 7 different types of dialogue. Character to character, but there are other types that we can use as well. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to watch a sample reference story. It's only 2 minutes long. And in this story, it has 4 of the 7 different types of dialogue. And then we'll cover the other ones later. But I'm telling you, after you watch this and get these 7 different types of dialogue, you're going to have your audience laughing all the way through. You're also going to have them feeling all the way through. So take a look at this reference story, 2 minutes long, and then we'll get back to the types of dialogue. Raise your hand if you feel like sometimes reality hurts. Yeah, now be honest, have you ever stepped on a scale and been forced to face reality? Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably looking at me like, Craig, what do you know about stepping on a scale? I mean, look at you. You're obviously built like a Greek statue. I appreciate the compliment. But I can only say that because if you had seen me a few years ago, trust me, you would have seen a lot more of me. In fact, you should have been with my wife and me 6.5 years ago. We're taking my 6-month-old daughter, Tori, to her doctor's appointment. Now, raise your hand if you have kids. Then you know the doctor's always going to measure their length and their weight, right? Somebody said height. Let me explain the length when you turn them. Anyway. Doc walks in with his white coat and glasses. He takes Tori's length. Then he looks at my wife and me and he says, Since Tori can't stand yet, and she can't seem to sit still, we're going to need another method to take her weight.
Hello?
How about this? Why doesn't one of you step out into the hallway and step on the scale with Tori, and then step on the scale without Tori, and we'll take the difference as her weight. Now, I don't know if you've ever been around somebody who just recently gave birth, but my wife was looking at us like, oh, that's a wonderful idea for Craig to do. I said, no problem, I know what I weigh. I jumped up on that scale. I said, give me my daughter. I took my daughter, stripped her down to her diapers. I'm feeling good holding my 6-month-old daughter in my arms.
Fine.
I looked down at that scale. I looked back at my wife. I looked back at that scale. I said, good grief, this is a fat baby. I thought somebody was about to step on my punchline there. Somebody was on a phone call while I'm on my speech. Hopefully that didn't distract you too much and you were able to hear what was said there. But let me just mute the person. Here we go, mute all. I'm glad the person didn't incriminate herself too much. But let's get into the different types of dialogue here. Okay, first, we have inner dialogue. Now, character-to-character dialogue we talked about before, but inner dialogue, that's really what I'm saying at the end there. I thought this is a fat baby. That's not something I said out loud. It's something I said to myself. I thought this is a fat baby, but they laughed, right? So here's what I'm saying. If you thought it then, you can say it now. Your audience just needs to know that it was a thought, right? So how do you do that? You make sure you have a stem. And the stem would be something like, and I was thinking, this is a fat baby. Or I remember thinking, this is a fat baby. Or I thought, this is a fat baby. So you need some kind of a stem. But here's the one stem that I hear a lot. Let me know if you hear this too. You ever hear somebody say, I thought to myself? Well, who else are you going to think to? So we can actually take the to myself part out of it and just say, I thought, and give what that inner dialogue was. Whenever I'm working with somebody and I'm coaching them, as Marion and Isaac know, because they're in my inner circle, I ask them, what were you thinking in that moment? What were you thinking in that moment? I'll give you an example. I was coaching a young guy, and he was talking about this speech of when he was in high school, he ran cross country. And in his first cross country meet, he was running, and it was a co-ed high school, so they would all run at the same time. He said, I was running, I was about 10 minutes into it, and this girl came running up next to me, and she said, hi, my name is Becky, what's yours? Now, this is in the middle of a cross-country meet. So I had to ask him, I said, well, Mark, what were you thinking? He said, I was thinking, are they talking out here? I said, you got to put that right there in your message. So now when he tells that story, it's like, and I'm 10 minutes in and I'm running, and a young girl runs up to me and she says, hi, my name is Becky, what's yours? And I'm thinking, they talking out here? Right, and then we can uncover humor there, and then we can continue to uncover humor as we move along. So it's very important to share what you were thinking in certain parts, but don't say, I thought to myself, okay? Now, you can also use second person inner dialogue. What does that mean? It means instead of thinking about it in terms of I should do this, it's come on, you should do this. So it'd be something like, come on, Craig, you got to get yourself together. You know you can do this. Be honest. Raise your hand if you ever kind of chastise yourself in that way. All right. Let us hear it. Glenn, right? If you ever talk to yourself that way, you got to say, come on, Craig, you can do this. You can hit this goal. Or come on, Craig, we got this. We got this. Even if you're encouraging yourself or chastising you, whatever, you can use second person inner dialogue. Mix it up. But definitely let us know what you were thinking at a certain moment. Now we're coming upon my favorite tool in all of public speaking. It's called projected dialogue. Projected. And Isaac, hopefully you're going to allow me to share your part of what you did. But projected dialogue, what is that? That's when you give dialogue to another character based on how he or she was looking at you. You heard it in that story. I said, I don't know if you've ever been around somebody who just recently gave birth, but my wife was looking at us like, that's a wonderful idea for Craig to do. Now, did my wife actually say that? No, she looked at me as if she wanted to say it. So I can give her that dialogue based on how she was looking at me. Here's the greatest part about it. You can also give your audience dialogue. I did it right there in that story. I said, I know what you're thinking. You're probably looking at me like, Craig, what do you know about stepping on a scale? I mean, look at you. You're obviously built like, I don't know, some sort of Greek statue. Now, here's the thing. They weren't even thinking that, but I could still get a laugh from it. So use projected dialogue. But again, with projected dialogue, guess what we need? We need a stem. And the stem would be something like, she looked at me as if to say, you get on the scale. I'm not getting on there. Right? He was looking at me like, come on, Craig, don't go there. Or if I'm talking to the audience, I say, you're looking at me like, Craig, I like this projected dialogue, man. Let me tell you why. It gives you one thing that we really need in public speaking: freedom. Freedom. Think about it, James. Those last 2 points, inner dialogue and projected dialogue. You can give inner dialogue, which is what your thoughts. It was something that wasn't said out loud. But projected dialogue, you can give dialogue to somebody based on how they're looking at you, and that also wasn't said out loud. So do you see as a speaker how much freedom this actually gives you? Let me give another example. Isaac, do you mind? Can I share your example?
No, not at all, Craig.
Okay. Do you mean no, not at all? I can't share it, or no, you don't mind?
No, share.
All right. I'm just going to give it quickly. Isaac is talking about getting into Weight Watchers, and he was encouraged to start walking. One of the only problems was when Isaac would walk, the Weight Watchers place was right next to the hometown buffet. So when I was talking to Isaac, I said, Isaac, we need to give the hometown buffet some dialogue. See, that's where you get real freedom. You want to do it, or should I do it, Isaac? What do you think?
Sure, I'll do it.
All right. So Isaac is walking by. He's doing one of his daily walks, and he walks by the hometown buffet. Isaac, take it from where? There. What's the hometown buffet say?
Hey, Isaac, don't walk by me like you don't know me. This is hometown buffet. Come on, stop in here and get some of that sweet old cobbler like you like it.
Right? So now it's not just I'm walking by this hometown buffet and I'm getting tempted. No, I'm walking by the hometown buffet and it's looking at me like, come on, Isaac, don't walk by us like you don't know us. Right? Come on in here and get some of that good peach cobbler. And then what do you say? What do you think at that moment, Isaac?
I said, no way. Not today, hometown buffet. And I kept walking.
I love it. Hometown buffet, not today. And Isaac keeps on walking. Okay. So that's the type of thing we can do. We can give dialogue even to inanimate objects. I have another lady in my inner circle. She was talking about playing pickleball. She says pickleball is much better than golf because in pickleball, you never lose the ball. But in golf, you might swing and all of a sudden the golf ball is looking at you like, let's play hide and seek. I'll hide and you seek. You can be very, very creative with the projected dialogue. I use it all the time. You know who is the best person at using this? Keith Harrell. Keith Harrell, Harrell. He was by far my favorite speaker. Late, great Keith Harrell, died way too young. But here's what he would do. He would have his audience and he would get at least 20 laughs per keynote just by projecting dialogue onto his audience. So for example, he might say something like this. Turn to your neighbor and give them $1 million smile. I got a big old guy over here looking at me like, hey man, don't be grinning at me. I won't be grinning at you. Hey, and he would just constantly do that with his audience. I'm telling you, Claire, it was absolutely brilliant. So I said, you know what? I'm going to start doing this with my audience more. And how do you do it? By understanding what they might be thinking in a certain moment. And then boom, you tell them what they're thinking. Here's what happens when you tell them what they're thinking, Steve. 2 things happen. Number 1, they might laugh. And number 2, you will connect. Because they'll know you're. Here's what I used to think. I used to think inner dialogue was the best because you can't get your audience any closer to you than bringing them inside of your own mind. Guess what I came to realize? I was wrong. You can't get any closer to your audience than getting inside of theirs. And that's what projected dialogue does. So I want you to see me project dialogue onto my audience right here. Take a look. Please stay muted. We're going to play a game. And the game is called Find the Phrase. And here's how it works. You're going to hear a very quick story from me. You're going to partner up with one person, and you're going to come up with the best foundational phrase you can within 60 seconds. Now, the winner gets a prize. If you win this, you get that program. It's $297. I got people looking at me like, Craig, I want to switch partners. All right. So I thought about what they might be thinking, and I said, I got people looking at me like, Craig, I want to switch partners. And I'll use that every single time I do that activity. I'm going to get that same laugh in that same place. Now I got a quiz for you. Here's the quiz. You're going to see a very short segment of one of my stories. And I want you to tell me at least 3 of the different types of dialogue I use. And then I'll tell you why this part of the story is so special in my heart. So take a look at this.
No, I ran into my speaking hero. And I said to him, oh my gosh, I'm Craig Valentine, and because I won the world championship, I'm able to introduce you today. You're the person who made me want to get into this business in the first place. Thank you for coming here. This means so much to me. Nothing. He said absolutely nothing. He just looked at me as if to say, you don't belong on the same stage. Now, I don't know how you would react to this, but I got to thinking he's about to get an introduction he didn't expect. You don't know me.
All right, so let's speak up here. This is where you can unmute yourself. I want you to speak up and tell me the different types of dialogue that you just heard in that very quick 45-second clip. What'd you hear?
Projected dialogue.
And
Good.
inner dialogue.
Good, good. Aisha's here too. She's in the inner circle. And projected dialogue, what was the projected? Okay, you heard character to character, right? When I'm saying to him, hey, I'm Craig Valentine, I get to introduce you today. I'm excited. That's character to character dialogue. What was the projected dialogue?
He
He's
looked
looking
at
at you
you
as
as
if
if
to say,
Me as if to say,
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, he looked at me as if to say, you don't belong on the same stage. Did you hear the effect on the audience? Did you hear them go, oh, you know why? Because projected dialogue lands the same way as if somebody had actually said it. So keep in mind here, we're not telling a lie. We're telling the truth. We're telling our truth. So even though it wasn't said out loud, he was saying it with his face. I can still see him to this day saying that with his eyes and with his face. So as long as I have that stem and I'm letting them know, he looked at me as if to say. And then somebody also got it right on the chat, the inner dialogue. All right. I said, I don't know how this would affect you, but I got to thinking he's about to get an introduction he did not expect. You don't know me. Boom. So why is that special to me? Because the majority of that story, if you were a fly on the wall, you would have never heard anything. Right? There was no out loud dialogue. The way he looked at me as if to say, you don't belong on the same stage, that was not said out loud. When I said he's about to get an introduction he did not expect, that was not said out loud. So I created an entire story around 2 things that weren't even said out loud. And it is all still absolutely 100% true. My truth. So I just want to encourage you to use projected dialogue and use inner dialogue, because it's really going to take you to a whole different level when it comes to laughs and when it comes to heart and even when it comes to hurt, which you heard me be hurt in that one. So I'm going to mute you again really quickly, and then we'll get back into it. Mute all. All right. Yeah, raise your hand if you're excited about projected dialogue. You will be. I see the hand up, but you will, and people are using it and using it and using it. But don't forget about inner dialogue as well. Let's go on to the next piece of dialogue. It's actual audience dialogue. Actual audience dialogue. Here's where I see as a problem with some speakers. They're too attached to their script. So when somebody in the audience says something funny, which is often what people do, we just keep going on like it never happened. But we need some actual audience dialogue. An example of that would be in that same story. I said, raise your hand if you have kids. Then you know the doctor's always going to measure their length and somebody yelled out height. Now, let me give you a little secret. Somebody always yells out height, right? Joanne, so I can take that and I say, somebody said height. Let me explain. When you take the length and you turn them, that actually becomes the height, and I can get another laugh. Here's a question though. What if, for some reason, nobody says height, nobody yells it out? What can I do? Feel free to unmute yourself. What can I do if nobody, Aisha, what can I do?
Act as if.
Projected dialogue.
Projected.
Steve said act as if, which is good. Somebody said projected dialogue. She's looking at me as if to say height. Height, let me explain. The length, when you turn them, becomes so that's an option. Glad you're getting that. Aisha, what do you think?
One is projecting, the other is you can just keep going as if it was not part of the script at all.
Okay, I can keep going. But let's say I want to take advantage of that moment because it's funny that somebody said that. Here's what I can do.
Use second person inner dialogue.
And how would that look, Cassandra?
So if they said height, you say, well, I'm thinking if you turn the baby this way, or Craig, so Craig, if you were to turn the baby this way, then it would give you height.
I like it. I like it. I got options. But here's what I can do if nobody yells out height. I can bring in a former audience. I can say my last audience, somebody yelled out height. I said, height? Let me explain. The length, when you turn them, actually becomes the height. So it's what I call carryover humor. If something happened funny in one of your previous audiences, carry it over. This ain't Vegas, right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in an old speech, you can carry over to a new one. So I just want you to know that that's something that you can do. But when somebody in your audience says something funny, don't ignore it. Enhance it, amplify it. I was giving a story about you're always too something to someone, right? You might be too black, too white, too big, too small, too Republican, too Democrat, too Dallas Cowboys, too Dallas Cowboys. But you're always too something to someone. So I asked my audience, I said, well, raise your hand if you ever felt like you were too something before. Let me ask you, raise your hand if you ever felt like you were too something. Okay, either chat it or yell it out. Too what? What were you? Too what?
Too talkative.
Too talkative?
Too blind. Too fat.
Too blind? Too
forward.
Too forward. Great, these are good ones. And there was somebody in my...
Too loud.
I believe it.
Too
No, I'm
funny.
kidding. Okay. Too funny,
Sorry.
absolutely. And I can riff off of all these. I can play jazz off of all these because I know what the usual responses are and I can respond to those responses. But somebody in Minnesota in my audience, he yelled out, too handsome. And I said, yeah, and obviously too humble. Right? So we can do that time and time again, but don't ignore when people in your audience say something funny. Don't ignore it, amplify it. Okay? You'll get some more laughs out of it. And guess what else will happen? Something very important when it comes to public speaking. You want to always find ways to temporarily make other people the stars of your speech. You want to find ways to temporarily make other people the stars of your speech. Let me tell you a secret. Just because you're the speaker doesn't mean you should be the only one who speaks. We want to share that stage with other people. All right, so here we go. Let's go to the next one. We have character-to-character dialogue, inner dialogue, projected dialogue, and the stems that go along with that. We have actual audience dialogue, but we also have quotations. Quotations. Quotations are sayings that people who are not in your story have said, and they come to mind. I'll give you an example. If I'm talking about facing reality, which is a big thing that I talk about, one of my 4 R's to remarkable results, I can bring in James Baldwin, And I can say the author James Baldwin said, not everything that's faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Boom. I never go into a speech alone. I'm always bringing historical figures with me. I'm bringing James Baldwin. I'm bringing Frederick Douglass. I'm bringing Sojourner Truth. I'm bringing Patricia Fripp, although, you know, she's still with us, thankfully, gratefully. But I'm bringing Patricia. I'm bringing all kinds of people in my story to help me get my message across. So here's an example of me uncovering humor, not adding it, but uncovering humor by using a quotation. Take a look.
Okay, Sal, so when I was in prison, visiting, to clarify that, an inmate came up after my presentation. He said, Craig, getting out of here in a few months, man, I'm feeling good about life, and I'm back on the right track. But you know, there's a quote by Will Rogers who says you might be on the right track, but if you just stand there, what's going to happen? You ran over it. So I left that day thinking, well, I'm glad he's back on the right track, but maybe I'm standing still as a speaker.
All right. So who did I bring in there? Will Rogers. Right. And I can do that, and I can bring in other people. So never go into a speech alone. But here's the thing that I add as a caveat. Don't buy a quote book and then start quoting people. Why? Why shouldn't I buy a quote book and just start quoting people with these nice, juicy quotes? What do you think? Aisha?
It won't be authentic. It will not be authentic.
It won't be authentic. And why won't it be authentic?
Because you're just memorizing a bunch of quotes and trying to force it in the speech and not actually
Exactly.
flow.
Right. So my thing is, if it's not a quote that touched you, don't bring it into your story. Right? If it didn't move you, don't bring it in to move your audience. It needs to really mean something to you in your life. That James Baldwin quote means something to me, and that's why I bring it in. So very, very important. But here's the other reason why you shouldn't get a quote book and start quoting people, because you don't even know who these people are. Right? We got to do more research into these people, Flora, so that we can make sure we're not quoting a monster, because even the worst people in the world have said some great things. So make sure we know who we're quoting also. I used to have a rule where I would only quote somebody if I had read at least one book on that person. I've since relaxed those standards because there's a lot of ways to find out information about people, but know who you are quoting, please. Okay, let's keep moving along. So we have 5 is quotation. 6 is what I wanted to say. What I wanted to say. Have you ever been in an experience and you wanted to say something to somebody, but you held back? Raise your hand if you've ever been in that type of experience. You might even be in one right now, right? You wanted to say something, but you held. Let me give you an example really quickly. When I was in college, I went to Towson University in Baltimore, out in Baltimore County. And the way the dorm was set up where I lived, I lived in a tower, Tower C. The way the dorm was set up was when you walked out of the elevator, you were facing the study lounge. And then all around the study lounge were the dorms, the rooms, and it was a co-ed floor. So I walk out of the elevator one day into the study lounge, and there's this girl, Liza, who I knew a little bit, and she's in there crying. And I just said, well, I got to help her out here. So I walked up and I said, Liza, what's going on? Are you okay? And she's crying. She says, no. She says, somebody took my textbook and I have a midterm tomorrow, or I have a final exam tomorrow, and I need to study and I don't have the textbook. And somebody took it. I can't believe this. And I said, okay, Liza, calm down. Now, let me bring you in on this for a second. It's the end of the semester. It's a final exam. What do people do with their textbooks afterwards? Go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself. What do people do with the textbooks after the semester?
Sell them.
Sell them
back. Sell them.
Yeah, I mean, come on, as a college student, we need all the money,
Sell them.
so we sell them back.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I knew in an instant that some of the shady people on my floor had taken her book and were planning on selling it back. So I said, Liza, don't worry. I'm going to go around. I know most of the people on the floor. I'm just going to knock on doors and see if I can find out anything. So boom, boom, boom. I'm knocking on doors. I'm like, look, Liza's in the study lounge crying. Somebody either took her textbook or there's a mistake, but please, if you know anything, just let me know. Please, please, please. I'm knocking on every door, saying the same thing. Finally, I get to around my room. I'm about to knock on my door because I see if my roommate's in there. Excuse me, on the door next to mine, see if my suite mate is in there. And all of a sudden, a young lady from the hall runs up to me. She says, Craig, taps me on the shoulder. I said, yeah. She said, here. She said, please don't ask any questions. I didn't take it. Please don't ask any questions, but just give this back to her. So now I have the book. I said, I don't care who took it. I'm just excited because when I get back in that study lounge, I want to see the look of exhilaration on Liza's face. And so I go back around the corner. I walk back in the study lounge. I put it behind my back. I said, here. And instead of a look of exhilaration, I saw a look of accusation. As if she wanted to say, you took my book. You were going to sell my book. Now, I know you're a decent person, but what would you have wanted to say in that moment? Unmute yourself. I want to hear it. Ben, say it. Give it to me, Ben.
How dare you?
How dare you? I hope you fail. Right? Look, come on, Glenn. What else would you want to say? Be honest here.
Next time I ain't helping you.
Next time I ain't helping you. Exactly. What else?
Really? You would think that, right?
Exactly. That's it. Really? Okay. So there are a lot of things you can say. I'm gonna take this book back. I'm gonna give it back to the person who gave it to. There's all kinds of things you can say in that moment. But here's why I like that so much. Because you could say what you wanted to say, and then you can say what you actually did, or you can juxtapose those. So imagine if I said, and in that moment, I wanted to say, are you serious? Really? Never helping you again. I hope you fail. But what I actually did was gave her book and walked out. So we can get what we wanted to say and we can get what we did say. Here's an example of that. Jennifer, who was in my inner circle about the last inner circle that came through, she had a story about when she was 7 years old and she went to the theater to watch the Beatles. Right? That's what they used to do back in the day. They would go to the theater and watch the Beatles. So she was really shy. She didn't want to stand up, cause any attention, but everybody else in the theater was standing up and singing along with the Beatles. So Jennifer got up the nerve and she said, I'm going to stand up. And she got up and she started singing along with the Beatles. And she was standing there and she felt a little bit self-conscious, but she was doing it. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. And then a moment later, somebody tapped her on the back. And it was an older man. He said, sit down. You're in my way. What do you think Jennifer wanted to say in that moment? Unmute yourself. What do you think as a 7-year-old, where everybody else is dancing and singing, she's the one who gets tapped on the shoulder, told to sit back down. What do you think she wanted to say in that moment?
Get a life and dance along.
I love it, Aisha. Get a life and dance on. Get a life and dance along. What she told me she wanted to say was, you sit down. You be quiet. Everybody else is in here dancing. Everybody else is in here singing. Why are you tapping me? You sit down. But what I actually did was I sat back down. And for the next 25 years, I never got back on any type of stage. So this is what I'm telling you. You could share what you wanted to say, and then you can share what you actually did. And now you have this heart and this hurt and maybe even some humor. So that should be fun because, again, it gives you that freedom. It's not something that you said, but it's something that you wanted to say. You just need to let your audience know what I wanted to say was this. Okay, let me go to something that's the seventh, which is similar, but a little bit different. And this is what I should have said. Now, this is when you're telling your story and you're letting your audience what you should have said in that moment. Give you a quick example. And by the way, you're about to find out how corny I am and how corny I think. But I'm fine, and I embrace my corniness. So here's what happened. I'm going from Baltimore to Las Vegas. Now, most people go to Las Vegas for what? For fun. I always go for work. But when you get on a flight to Vegas, everybody's happy. So I get on the flight, we're about to take off, and I'm saying, oh man, I forgot my headphones. So I stand up, get to the top bin, unlock, open it, and then I went to get my headphones, and my keys that were up there accidentally fell on the lady's head in the seat in front of me. Boom, hit her right there on the head. And I'm horrified, but then I remember we're going to Vegas, so everybody's happy. So she gets the keys and looks back at me and she says, keys? Really? Keys? Why would you have your keys fall on my head? Why would you put your keys on my head? And what I should have said was, well, maybe I was trying to open your mind. Right? That's how I think. Joanne, that's how I think. So I can easily say that. But what I actually said was, I'm sorry. And she handed me the keys and we went on to Vegas. So I just want you to know there's so much freedom here. I love that too, Dr. Sherry. Unlock your potential. There are all these punchlines I can put right there of what I should have said. But guess what? You can do the same thing. So if you're ever telling a story, well, let's just put it here on a visual. I want you to look at the screen here. Raise your hand if there was ever anything that happened to you and you wished you had said something different. Now it's your chance. Now's your chance. But we need to be truthful to our audience and let them know this is not something I said, it's something I should have said. So if you really look at these, character is said out loud. Inner dialogue is said in your mind. Projected dialogue is not said out loud. Actual audience dialogue is said out loud. Quotes were said a long time ago. What I wanted to say was not said out loud. What I should have said was not said out loud. So a lot of these different types of dialogue were not things that were said out loud, but I guarantee you, when you set it up the right way with the right stem and you say it, your audience is going to laugh just as hard as they would as if those things were actually said out loud. These are 7 different types of dialogue that will absolutely enhance, bolster, and change every single story you give for the rest of your life. So let's move forward. You say, Craig, I thought you said there are 10 terrific tips. I did. By the way, what type of dialogue was that? What type of dialogue was that? Come on, Craig, you said there were 10 different types of projected dialogue. That's it. Halim, projected dialogue. See, I slipped it in there. I didn't even know I was doing it. I honestly didn't even know I was doing it. And that's what's going to happen with you as you keep moving forward. Project dialogue onto your audience. By the way, one last thing that I just realized I did. If you're projecting dialogue onto your audience, what's most likely the most important word you need to use?
You.
This is say it again.
You.
Say it again. Okay. You is by far the most important word in speaking. People say it is. I say, yes, you is. You is by far, but there's actually an equally important word when it comes to projected dialogue. Let me give you 2 more projected dialogue lines again, just like the one I just gave you. You're thinking, Craig, come on, man. You said there were 10 tips. Or remember the other line. I know what you're thinking. You're looking at me like, Craig, what do you know about stepping on a scale? I mean, look at you. You're obviously built like some sort of Greek statue. What were the 2 words?
You and thinking.
Greg, your name. So if you project dialogue onto your audience, yes, I'll do that, Angela. If you can project dialogue onto your audience, have them put your name in the sentence. That way you wouldn't know the audience is speaking to you. So if I'm Claire, who's in New Zealand, who met me in Bahrain, and Claire's telling her story, she could say, I know what you're thinking. You're looking at me like, Claire, did you really meet Craig in Bahrain? Right? So you could just do it that way. So put your name as the recipient. And part of that, not for projected dialogue, but part of that in terms of putting the recipient's name in the line of dialogue, that's something I learned from Patricia Fripp, the great Patricia Fripp. In any type of dialogue, you can put the recipient's name in. Okay, so somebody wanted me to cover the stems for projected dialogue. So I'm going to do that verbally again. The stem would be something like, she looked at me as if to say, ... He looked at me like he wanted to say, ... Now, speaking wise, you could easily say something like, he was looking at me like, ... You can make it as short and quick as possible. They're looking at me like, don't come down this side of the street. So it could be they, it could be he, it could be she, it could be whatever. There's a lot of pronouns nowadays, so you got to get used to them, okay? But that's the type of projected dialogue. For inner dialogue, Angela, it would be, I thought, or I was thinking, or I remember thinking. Just find a way. But the one that it should not be is I thought to myself, because there's nowhere else to think to. It's just like the people, we want to avoid unnecessary words, right? Think about what are the unnecessary words in this sentence? What's the worst thing that ever happened to you in your life? What are the unnecessary words in that sentence?
In your life?
Thank you, in your life. Where else is it going to happen, right? So you can easily just ask, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you? Well, let me get you in a better mood. What's the best thing that ever happened to you? We can remove in your life. So we want to remove unnecessary words. All right, so let's get into the last three tools. One of the things we want to do as a speaker is take our audience on a roller coaster ride of emotions. So we want to do what I call lift them up to let them down. Lift them up to let them down. Make sure you're muted because I want you to listen to an example of this. Take a listen. If you had picked up my phone in the year 2000, you would have heard a woman from the Michigan Consolidated Gas Company say to me, Craig, we want you to come out here and speak, and for 45 minutes, we're going to pay you $3,500. Now, you have to understand, I was a newbie speaker. I was already the world champion, but this is like my first high-paid keynote speech. So I was very excited, but what else do you think I was? Scared. Judy, I was scared to death. And to make things worse, they flew me out first class. Swept me up in a black limo. Took me out, wined and dined me. Drove me over to a 5-star hotel. Swept me up the next morning in that same black limo. Drove me over to the event. As I'm walking up on stage, the lady who convinced her higher-ups to hire me tucks into my jacket pocket a check for $3,500. I'm going out of my mind. And I gave them a $150 speech. I failed miserably. Got it? We're taking them up and up and up and up, and then boom, the bottom drops out. Did you feel the audience's reaction? Could you hear them? They were coming with me, they're coming with me, they're coming with, oh. So we lift them up to let them down. And there are a lot of moments you can do this. I'll give you an example. When I talk about reading, and I read so much, and I'm reading and I read myself all into to getting up on stage and winning the world championship of public speaking. And you know how I felt afterwards? Empty. Boom, take you up, bring you back down. Now, here's the problem. What happens if we leave them down? Flora, I'll tell you what happens. They walk away and say, wow, that was a demotivational speaker. Right? We don't want to be that, Halim. So what I do is, thank you, Sherry, we want to bring them back up. But there's a specific way that we need to do this. See, people ask me all the time, they say, Craig, how do you uncover humor in a serious speech? Or how do you uncover humor in a serious moment? Right, Mickey? So here's how you can do it. Take a listen. This is the same exact story, and I'm picking up in the very next part of the story. You take them down to lift them up. So there's a very specific way to do this. Take a listen. I failed miserably. It was so bad that the lady who convinced her higher-ups to bring me in, by the time I stepped off of that stage, she wouldn't even look me in the eyes. I was absolutely devastated. Even the limo driver was looking at me like, man, I still got to take you back? And now we're up. Now we're up. Now we have the levity, right? So here's my question to you. How do we handle that situation? Who said the funny line? Feel free to unmute yourself. We're going to talk now. Who said the funny? Aisha, I have to ban you from this one because you know all the answers. I can't let you answer
The
this
Limo
one.
driver.
Driver.
The limo driver.
Not
The limo
you.
driver. Not, thank you. Not me. Because when I'm down in the dumps, it wouldn't make sense for me to say something funny because it would feel forced. But guess what? When I'm down in the dumps, it doesn't mean everybody else in my story is down in the dumps. When you're down in the dumps, it doesn't mean everybody else in your story is down in the dumps. So let that other person give you the lift line. Don't worry, Aisha, I'll let you close the show today. But let the other person give the lift line. For example, how do you lift them back up? Give your other characters the lift line. Again, it wouldn't have made sense if I took myself down and was feeling really emotional and tried to say something funny to lift up the audience. When I worked with Les Brown on our program, he tells the story about buying a house for his mother. You might be familiar with the story, but there was a lien on the property he didn't realize, and all of a sudden he had to get rid of the house. And he was so upset, and he built the conflict so well, and he finally met the moment where he had to tell his mom. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he told his mom, he said, "Mom, this happened, and I didn't pay attention to this, and we're going to have to sell it. We're going to have to move out of the house." And his mother said, "Good, I ain't like this house anyway. Right? This house has 2 floors. There's my arthritis. I can't walk around. I ain't like." So she gave the lift line and made everybody feel better and got the laugh. So make sure when it's in a serious moment, a serious speech, let the other character give the lift line. Let me ask you, just out of curiosity, have you ever been sad or in some type, or mad or in some type of situation, and somebody next to you says something funny? Yeah, share it. Share it. If you're willing to share it today, feel free to speak up, but make sure you share it. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have one, feel free to raise your hand and let me know, and I'll call on you. Aisha, what? Give me one.
My husband got laid off and he came and told me the news, and I said, "Wow, that's the best news. Let's go out to celebrate."
So you gave the lift line because he is down, but you're not. So I guess that can happen too, right? Somebody else is down, but you're not down, so you can give the lift line. Now, if Aisha's down, then maybe her husband can give the lift line, or her brother, or whomever. Okay, good, love it. Let's keep moving on to the 10th one. Let me go backwards here. One of the things we want to do, and this is a tool where you can uncover some humor. If you're going back and forth too much with your dialogue, like one character says this, the other character says that, the other character says this, the other character, and you keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Number one, your audience is going to feel like they're at Wimbledon because their heads just going back and forth like this. But number two, you're going to lose them. So what you want to do, if there's a lot of dialogue between a couple characters, give some of the dialogue and break it up and get some you focus with the audience. Whereas you might ask the audience some questions, and then you might be able to uncover some humor and then go back into that same conversation that you were in. So here's a quick example of me on a flight talking to a guy, and then I break up the dialogue by talking to the audience, uncover some humor, and get back into the story. Take a look. The first 4.5 hours of the flight, we say absolutely nothing to each other, right? The last half hour of the flight, he turns to me and he says, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm fine. You know, I've actually been here the whole time." He said, "I'm sorry I didn't talk to you earlier, but I didn't want to talk to you and then find out you were boring, and then we start talking to a boring person for 5 hours." But I kind of understood because I'm kind of the same way. But how do people try to start a conversation with you on a flight? What are some of the things they say? What do you do? What else? Where are you from? Where are you from? What else? Where are you going? Yeah, and the where are you going is like, hopefully we're going to the same place. Drop me off over San Antonio. He didn't say any of that. In fact, I felt like he was looking through me.
And he said, well, what do you want to do?
All right. So now I'm right back into the conversation. So break up the dialogue. Sometimes we can lose an audience if we just keep going back and forth too many times. Figure out what kind of you-focused questions or you-focused attention you can give to your audience. And by the way, you-focused means audience-focused. And then you can pop back into it. Okay? All right. So here's what I'd like you to do before we close shop today. I want you to think of one of the tools you feel like jumped out at you that you feel like you can use the most or that you can use the best. Okay, think of one of those. I'm just still looking at Glenn. I don't know which one is the person and which one is the puppet, but I'm looking at, if you can look at Glenn right there, it looks just like Willie Tyler and Lester. It's one of, anyway, I want you to make sure that you give one or two of these ideas that stuck out at you. Okay, so if you're ready, go ahead and put it in the chat or unmute yourself and yell it out. But yeah, thank you. Nishant, projected dialogue, my absolute favorite. So if I was using that with Nishant, I would say, Nishant's looking at me like, Craig, I love that projected dialogue piece, right? Make it a part of you. Projected dialogue, good.
What I wanted to say.
What I wanted to say. Because I know Aisha a little bit now. She's in the inner circle. So I know there are times where things happen and she wants to say something.
You know, I think one of the great things is all these techniques really allow you to construct a scene and be in complete control of the story, even though a person in the audience might not have seen that, but you can construct it in that way.
And I'm so excited that you said that, Steve, because what dialogue does, and thank you for putting all these things in the chat. I love it. I love what I'm seeing here. Lift them up to let them down. What dialogue does, Steve, is it provides immediacy to your story. The moment you start using dialogue is the moment your audience members are inside of your scene. Now, you might do some other things to put them in your scene, such as imagine being in my passenger seat when this happened. Now they're physically in my passenger seat. But the moment you use dialogue, they are in there hearing it how you heard it, even if it's in your own mind. That's why when I'm coaching people and they say something like, and then the doctor told me I had cancer, and then I said, wait, stop. You got to put your life-changing lines in dialogue. What did the doctor say? How did he or she say it? And then, boom. And here's the other thing, Steve. You can't react to narration. You can only react to dialogue. So one of my favorite stories, one of my famous stories is when my wife says, your dream is not for sale. That's deep, isn't it? Boom. But what if I said, and then my wife told me my dream wasn't for sale? You can't react to that. That's narration, but you can react to it when it's dialogue coming from another person or coming from you or coming from your audience. So all of these things work together, as Steve said, to create the scene. And here's the secret. A character in your story might be saying something to you, but your audience can feel like they're saying it to them. When my wife says your dream is not for sale, I look at somebody in my audience when I give that part of the story and say, and she looked at me and she said, Craig, I don't care how much they try to compensate you, your dream is not for sale. And I know people hear it the same way I heard it. All right, good. Anything else? A lot of things were put out. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for showing up. All right, so let me do this. I'm going to tell you about 2 next steps that are possible for you, and then I'll show you how my life changed and I became a speaker. And I'm going to do this within like 2 minutes here. You're very welcome. Raise your hand if you'd like to be a full-time keynote speaker. Okay, if you're interested in giving keynote speeches and you want to earn between $4,500 and $9,500 per engagement, and here's the key I give you. Put the keynote together. Don't wait. Don't think, oh, I'll do it once. Put the keynote together. And if you're interested in doing that, I want you to go to a free webinar. And the free webinar is right at innercircleforspeakers.com. Go to a free webinar. It's about 50 minutes long, and it's going to give you the 5 musts for being a profitable speaker. It's going to give you the 5 musts for giving speeches that earn between $4,500 and $9,500 per engagement. And there's also a secret weapon in there for you as well to show you how you can get on this, what I call the speaker's cycle of wealth, which absolutely has to happen if you're going to be a speaker. Now, let me ask you a question. Raise your hand if you've ever coached anybody on a presentation. Okay, let me give you a secret. Most people who are professional speakers also do something else. I know people who are in real estate. I know people who are product salespeople. I know they do something else in addition to being a keynote speaker. Because like Patricia Fripp said, in between speeches, you could be unemployed. And you don't want that. So what do you think people are going to say to you after you give a very good speech? A lot of times they're going to give you, yeah, can you teach me how to do that? Exactly. So it makes sense to not only be a speaker, but also be a speech coach. So if you're interested in that, we have the World Class Speaking Coach Certification Program that's coming up, and we're starting on June 13th. We only have 14 spots left, and we just made the announcement last week. So if you're interested, make sure you go to certifiedspeakingcoach.com. Again, just visit these sites, whether you want to be a speaker or you want to be a speech coach or you want to be both. Being both has helped me have a stable business for 24, 25 years. Okay. All right. So as we close shop, I just want to say one thing. Let me go back and revisit the points that we made today. Character-to-character dialogue, inner dialogue, projected dialogue, actual audience dialogue, quotes, what I wanted to say, what I should have said, lift them up to let them down, take them down to lift them up, and break the dialogue with you-focused check-ins. Now, what am I doing here? If you've seen me speak before, you might know, you might not know, but what am I doing right here? I'm going to give you 15 seconds to take a look. Don't say it yet. All right, don't think I don't know the podium is backwards. It was just too heavy. I couldn't turn it around. But what am I doing there?
You're setting
Practicing.
up the room for your
Preparing.
presentation.
Good. Mickey said, I'm setting up the room for my presentation. Good. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing.
Practicing.
I'm practicing. But I'm not practicing out loud. What I'm doing is it's a thing that I did way before I became a speaker. And I'm going to close with this. And by the way, you'll see that I'm closing today with inner dialogue. But something I used to do all the time before I became a speaker is I used to be an events planner. And believe it or not, one of my jobs was setting up the stage for the speaker. Now, Joanne, can you imagine that all the while wanting to be the speaker? Right? So I walk into these ballrooms and auditoriums, and my job is to tape down the power cords, and I move the chairs around, and I move the podium or the lectern up front, and I move more chairs. They used to call me the chairman because I used to move so many chairs. But it never failed. When I would walk to the front of the room, just like you saw me doing there, every time I walked into one of these ballrooms, I would walk to the front, and I would stand in front of the lectern and look out on an empty audience. And I would hope that one day people would show up to see me. But I'm going to tell you, there was something that I said to myself, and I'll close with this. Every single solitary time I stood behind one of those lecterns. And what I said to myself was, today I move the chairs, tomorrow I move the audience. Thank you for coming today. Can we get a selfie? Let me get a selfie. Smile. Thank you so much. I'm going to do this every quarter, so I'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.